Hello everyone, welcome back to Building Modular Dreams. I'm Andrew, your host, and I'm joined as always by the man who somehow makes council approvals sound interesting, Mark Byers. How are you, mate?
Hello, Andrew. I'm good, mate. And hey, if someone's got to make council approvals interesting, why not me? Although, let's be honest, council approvals don't exactly scream party time, do they?
Definitely not. It's more like that awkward uncle at the party. It's necessary, but not exactly the life of it. But stick with us, folks, because today we're going to take all the confusion and stress out of council approvals. By the end of this episode, you'll feel a whole lot better about tackling this part of the modular home journey.
Absolutely. And more importantly, you'll learn how AJC Modular makes this whole process as painless as possible. Let's be real. No one wants to spend their weekends buried in forms or on hold with council officers. That's why we've made it our mission to handle it for you.
Spot on. But before we dive into how we do that, let's start with the basics. Mark, for anyone tuning in who might be new to this, what exactly are council approvals and why are they so important?
Great question, Andrew. Council approvals are essentially the formal green light you need from your local government to build a structure on your property. They're there to ensure that your project meets zoning laws, complies with building codes, and doesn't impact your neighbours or the environment in a negative way.
So they're like the referees of the building world, making sure everyone plays by the rules.
Exactly. And just like in sport, if you don't follow the rules, you're in trouble. You might get fined, be forced to halt construction, or even have to tear down your building if it's non-compliant.
Yep, that sounds like a nightmare. But here's the kicker. The rules aren't always straightforward, are they? I mean, councils can have different requirements depending on the area, the type of building, and even the size of the project.
Oh, absolutely. It's not one size fits all. For example, if you're building in a bushfire-prone area, the regulations are completely different from building in an urban suburb. Then there's heritage overlays, environmental protections, flood zones, you name it. And the thing is, most people don't know where to start.
And that's where we come in. At AJC Modular, we've built an in-house team that handles all of this for our customers. We take care of the forms, the reports, the meetings, everything. Basically, if it's a headache, we'll deal with it so you don't have to.
Exactly. But before we get into how we simplify the process, let's share some real-world examples. I think stories always help to paint the picture, don't you?
Absolutely. Let's talk about Sarah, a customer from Newcastle. She wanted to put a modular granny flat in her backyard for her mum. Sounds simple enough, right? But her property was in a heritage overlay zone.
The dreaded heritage overlay. For those listening who might not know, a heritage overlay means there are strict rules about what you can and can't build to preserve the historical character of the area.
Exactly. And Sarah was completely overwhelmed. The council wanted a heritage impact statement, design adjustments to match the area's aesthetic, and even an arborist report for some protected trees on her property. It was a mountain of paperwork.
But here's the thing. Sarah didn't have to handle any of it. She came to us and our team took care of everything. We worked with heritage consultants, liaised with the council, and made sure every box was ticked. Within weeks, Sarah had her approval and the granny flat was underway.
That's the kind of service we're all about. And it's not just heritage overlays. We've helped customers in bushfire zones, flood areas, and even on sloped blocks. Each case is unique, but the solution is the same. Leave it to the experts.
Exactly. And hey, while we're on the topic, let's give a quick shout out to AJC Modular. If you're thinking about building a modular home, you've got to check us out. We're not just builders, we're problem solvers. Head over to ajcmodular.com.au to learn more about how we can make your dream home a reality.
Nicely done, Mark. All right, let's get back to the process. Once we've gathered all the necessary reports and documents, what happens next?
The next step is submitting the application to the council. This is where it pays to have experience. We know exactly what councils are looking for, and because we've built strong relationships with them, our applications often get processed faster.
And while we're waiting for approval, that's a great time for customers to start planning the fun stuff, like interiors, landscaping, or even what colour to paint the walls.
Absolutely, but let's be real. Waiting isn't always easy. Some councils can take weeks or even months to process an application, depending on the complexity. That's why we keep our customers updated every step of the way, so they're never left in the dark.
Speaking of updates, Mark, what's the most common question we get from customers during this stage?
Oh, without a doubt, it's, how long is this going to take? And the answer is, it depends. But the good news is, because we've done this so many times, we can usually give a pretty accurate estimate up front.
That's key, isn't it? Managing expectations. And speaking of managing expectations, I think we've managed to make council approvals sound almost exciting.
Almost. But seriously, folks, the takeaway here is this. Council approvals don't have to be a roadblock. With the right team on your side, they're just another step in the process.
Couldn't have said it better myself, mate. All right, that's a wrap for part 1. In part 2, we'll share more real-world stories and dive into some of the trickiest approval cases we've handled. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Welcome back to Building Modular Dreams. If you're just joining us, we've been talking about the not-so-glamorous but oh-so-important world of council approvals. Mark, in part 1, we laid the groundwork, but now it's time to get into the real-world stuff, the stories that prove just how essential it is to have experts on your side.
That's right, Andrew, and let's kick things off with one of my favourite stories. Do you remember the project in Wollongong? The one where James, our client, wanted to build a modular home on a sloped block?
Oh, how could I forget? That was a tricky one. Let's paint the picture for our listeners.
All right, so James had this dream of building a modular home on his property. The catch? His land was on a steep slope and the council had very strict requirements for engineering and drainage. On top of that, it was in a flood-prone area. Basically, the odds were stacked against him.
Yeah, I remember he'd already started some preliminary site prep without consulting the council, which could have turned into a massive issue.
Exactly. He was at risk of hefty fines and potential delays. Luckily, James called us before things got out of hand. Our team stepped in, assessed the situation and came up with a plan. We liaised with engineers to address the slope and drainage issues, and we worked closely with the council to ensure everything met their flood zone requirements.
And didn't we also help him redesign the layout slightly to make better use of the space?
That's right. We shifted the position of the home to minimise excavation costs and to ensure it complied with setback requirements. The best part? We got the approvals through faster than James expected, and his project moved forward without a hitch.
That's a classic example of why it pays to have a team like AJC Modular in your corner. We're not just about building homes, we're about solving problems.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of problem solving, let's talk about Sarah from Brisbane. She wanted to build a granny flat for her mum, but was completely stuck because her property was in a heritage overlay zone.
Ah, yes, another tough one. For our listeners, a heritage overlay means there are strict rules about what you can build and how it looks, all to preserve the historical character of the area. It's a noble idea, but it can be a real pain for property owners.
Absolutely. Sarah was overwhelmed by all the requirements the council had thrown at her. They wanted a heritage impact statement, design modifications to match the area's aesthetic, and even an arborist's report because of some protected trees on the property.
And that's when she called us. We took over the entire process, didn't we?
We did. Our in-house team coordinated with heritage consultants, made the necessary design adjustments, and ensured all the paperwork was submitted correctly. We even liaised with an arborist to handle the tree-related issues. Within weeks, Sarah had her approvals and construction was underway.
And let's not forget, the final granny flat looked amazing. It blended perfectly with the character of the area and gave Sarah's mum a beautiful place to live. It's stories like this that make what we do so rewarding.
Absolutely.
Mark, all right, let's move on to another story. This one's about Dave from the Blue Mountains. He wanted to build a modular Airbnb retreat on his property, but his land was in a bushfire-prone area. That's a whole other set of challenges, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. In bushfire-prone areas, councils require compliance with specific building standards to ensure the safety of the structure and its occupants. Things like ember-proofing, using non-combustible materials, and maintaining clearances around the building are all mandatory. Dave had no idea where to start.
Luckily, we did. We worked with bushfire consultants to assess the site and provided a detailed report to the council. We also made design modifications, like incorporating fire-resistant cladding and ember-proof vents to meet the requirements.
And the best part? Dave's Airbnb retreat not only met all the safety standards, but also ended up being an absolute stunner. Guests love it, and Dave's already seeing a fantastic return on his investment.
That's what it's all about, turning challenges into opportunities. Mark, before we wrap up this part, what's the biggest takeaway for our listeners when it comes to council approvals?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is this. Don't try to navigate it alone. Council approvals are complex and time-consuming, but with the right team, they're completely manageable. Let the experts handle the red tape so you can focus on the exciting parts of your project.
Well said. And speaking of exciting, in part 3, we're going to dive into how our VR technology ties into the approval process. It's a game changer, and you won't want to miss it. Welcome back to Building Modular Dreams. This is part 3 of episode 3, and if you've been with us so far, You know, we've been talking about how AJC Modular simplifies council approvals. Now, Mark, we've covered some great real-world examples, but it's time to get into one of my favourite aspects of what we do, our VR technology.
Absolutely, Andrew. VR technology is a total game changer in the world of modular homes. It's one thing to read plans and look at 2D drawings, but stepping into a virtual representation of your future home? That's next level. It's like going from a black and white photo to full Technicolor.
It really is. And the best part? It's not just for show. Our VR configurator is incredibly practical, especially when it comes to the council approval process. Let's break this down for our listeners. What does the VR configurator actually do?
All right, picture this. You've got your modular home design ready. You're happy with the layout, the materials, the finishes. But how does it look on your actual property? Does it fit within the boundary setbacks? Is the roofline too high? Will it obstruct your neighbour's view? Our VR configurator answers all those questions. You can literally walk through your design in a virtual environment and see exactly how it will look and fit on your land.
And it's not just about aesthetics, is it? The VR configurator also helps us catch potential compliance issues early. For example, if a design doesn't meet height restrictions or encroaches on a protected tree zone, we can adjust it before submitting it to the council.
Exactly. It's like having a crystal ball that lets you see the future of your project, and it's not just helpful for customers, councils love it too. When we submit applications, we often include VR walkthroughs or screenshots. It gives council officers a clear, detailed understanding of what we're proposing, which can speed up the approval process.
And who doesn't love speeding things up? Now, Mark, let's talk about a real-world example where the VR configurator made a huge difference. Remember the Dave's project in the Blue Mountains?
Oh, I do. That was an Airbnb retreat on a tricky block. The property had a steep slope, was in a bushfire-prone area, and had incredible views that the customer wanted to maximise. The VR configurator was a lifesaver on that one.
Absolutely. For our listeners, the Dave's biggest concern was whether the modular building would look natural on the slope block and how it would align with the existing landscape. With the VR configurator, we were able to show them exactly how the home would sit on the slope and even how it would look during different times of the day.
That's right. And because the property was in a bushfire-prone area, we also used the VR configurator to highlight the fire-resistant features we were incorporating, things like ember-proof vents and non-combustible cladding. It not only reassured the customer, but also helped the council understand how the project met safety standards.
And the result? A stunning Airbnb retreat that's booked out months in advance. Dave was thrilled. The council was impressed, and we were just happy to see another dream come to life.
That's what it's all about. But Andrew, it's not just big projects where the VR configurator shines. Even for smaller builds like a granny flat or a site office, it's a fantastic tool. Customers can visualize everything, from the position of windows to the color of the walls, before a single nail is hammered.
And let's not forget, it's also just plain fun. There's something magical about putting on a VR headset and stepping into your future home. It's like a sneak preview of the life you're about to build.
Absolutely. And for those who can't make it to our display center to experience the VR configurator in person, we've got a web-based version too. It's all about making the process as accessible and convenient as possible.
Speaking of convenience, Mark, let's talk about how the VR configurator ties into the customer experience as a whole. What kind of feedback have we gotten from people who've used it?
The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Customers love being able to see their designs in such detail. It gives them confidence that they're making the right decisions. Plus, it eliminates a lot of the guesswork. They can see exactly how their choices, like feature wall color or cladding material, will look in real life.
And that confidence is so important, especially when you're making a big investment like building a home. But you know what, Mark? I think it's also about the excitement. People love showing their VR walkthroughs to family and friends. It's like sharing a piece of their dream before it's even built.
Couldn't agree more. And it's not just customers who benefit. As we mentioned earlier, councils appreciate the level of detail the VR configurator provides. It makes their job easier, which can lead to faster approvals.
That's a win-win if I've ever heard one. All right, Mark, before we wrap up this part, let's give our listeners a quick recap. Why is the VR configurator such a valuable tool?
Sure thing. Here's the quick rundown. 1. Realistic visualization. See exactly how your modular home will look and fit on your property. 2. Early issue detection. Spot potential compliance problems before they become roadblocks. 3. Customer confidence. Make design choices with certainty, knowing how they'll look in real life. 4. Council collaboration. Provide councils with detailed visuals to streamline the approval process. 5. Accessibility. Experience your design in person at our display centre or online through our web-based configurator.
Perfect summary, mate. And for our listeners, if you're as excited about this as we are, head over to ajcmodular.com.au to learn more and book your VR experience. Trust me, it'll blow your mind.
Absolutely. And don't forget, we've got more to share in the next part of this episode. We'll dive into some of the common pitfalls people face with council approvals and how to avoid them. Plus, we'll share a few more success stories because, let's face it, everyone loves a happy ending.
Definitely. And hey, before you go, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on social media and check out our YouTube channel for more behind-the-scenes action. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in part 4. Welcome back to Building Modular Dreams. If you've been following along, we're deep into episode 3, where we're tackling the often confusing world of council approvals. This is part 4, and today Mark and I are going to talk about some of the common pitfalls people face with approvals, and more importantly, how to avoid them.
That's right, Andrew. Look, when it comes to council approvals, it's easy to make mistakes. Some are minor and just cause delays, but others can be downright costly. So today we're going to shine a light on those potential roadblocks and give you the tools to sidestep them.
Exactly, because let's be honest, no one wants to be the person who spends weeks planning a dream project only to get hit with a big fat denied from the council. It's like preparing the perfect Aussie barbecue and realizing you forgot the snags.
Spot on, mate. And the thing is, a lot of these pitfalls are completely avoidable if you know what to watch out for. So let's jump into it. What's the first big mistake we see people make, Andrew?
All right, mistake number 1, not understanding your property's zoning. Every piece of land has zoning regulations that dictate what you can and can't do. For example, some zones are purely residential, while others might allow for mixed use or even commercial projects. If you start designing something that doesn't align with your zoning, you're in for a world of hurt.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the type of building. Zoning can also impact things like building heights, setbacks from the boundary, and even how much of the land you can cover with structures. If you don't check your zoning first, you're basically flying blind.
So, what's the fix? Before you do anything else, check your zoning. If you're working with AJC Modular, this is one of the first things we'll do for you. We'll look up the zoning, explain what it means, and make sure your project fits within the rules.
Exactly. And if there are restrictions, we'll work with you to adjust the design so it complies. All right, let's move on to mistake number 2. Ignoring environmental considerations. This is a big one, especially in areas like bushfire zones, flood zones, or properties with protected vegetation.
Oh, for sure. Environmental regulations are there for a reason, and councils take them very seriously. For example, if your property is in a bushfire-prone area, you'll need to meet specific building standards to ensure the safety of the structure and its occupants. Ignoring those requirements is a recipe for disaster.
Same goes for flood zones. If your property is at risk of flooding, the council might require elevated foundations or specific drainage solutions. And don't even get me started on trees. If you've got protected vegetation on your land, you'll need to be very careful about where you build.
So, how do we avoid this one? It's all about doing your homework up front. And again, this is something we handle at AJC Modular. We'll assess your site, identify any environmental risks, and make sure your design addresses them.
Exactly. And when councils see that you've thought about these issues and taken steps to address them, they're much more likely to approve your application quickly.
All right, on to mistake number 3. Failing to provide the right documentation. Look, councils love paperwork. If you don't give them the reports and certificates they need, your application is going straight to the bottom of the pile.
Yep. And it's not just about ticking boxes. Councils need to see things like engineering assessments, environmental impact statements, and even soil tests in some cases. If any of those are missing or incomplete, you're looking at serious delays.
And let's not forget the quality of the documentation. Sloppy or inaccurate reports can be just as bad as not providing them at all. That's why it's so important to work with professionals who know what they're doing.
100%. At AJC Modular, we have a dedicated team that handles all of this for you. We make sure every document is accurate, complete, and submitted on time. It's just one more way we take the stress out of the process.
And speaking of stress, let's talk about mistake number 4, not communicating with the council. A lot of people think they can just submit their application and sit back, but that's not how it works. Councils often have questions or need clarification, and if you're not responsive, your application can stall.
That's so true. And look, Councils aren't trying to be difficult. They just need to make sure everything's in order before they give the green light. If you keep the lines of communication open, it makes their job easier and speeds up the process. 100%. At AJC Modular, we have a dedicated team that handles all of this for you. We make sure every document is accurate, complete, and submitted on time. It's just one more way we take the stress out of the process. And that brings us to the last mistake we'll cover today, trying to go it alone. Look, I get it. Some people think they can save money by handling the approval process themselves, but in most cases, it ends up costing them more in time, stress, and even fines if they get it wrong.
Couldn't agree more. Council approvals are a complex, time-consuming process. Unless you've done it before, it's easy to miss something. That's why having a team like ours on your side is so valuable. We know the rules, we know the process, and we know how to get results.
Exactly. And hey, while we're on the topic, let's give another quick shout out to AJC Modular. If you're thinking about building a modular home, don't leave the approvals to chance. Let us handle it for you. Head over to ajcmodular.com.au to learn more about our in-house approval services.
Nicely done, Mark. All right, before we wrap up part 4, let's do a quick recap of the common pitfalls we've covered today. 1. Not understanding your zoning. Always check your property's zoning regulations before you start designing. 2. Ignoring environmental considerations. Be aware of bushfire zones, flood zones, and protected vegetation. 3. Failing to provide the right documentation. Make sure every required report and certificate is complete and accurate. 4th, not communicating with the council. Keep the lines of communication open to avoid delays. 5. Trying to go it alone. Don't make the process harder than it needs to be. Get professional help.
Perfect summary, Andrew. And remember, folks, council approvals don't have to be a nightmare. With the right team and the right approach, you can navigate the process smoothly and get one step closer to building your dream modular home.
Couldn't have said it better myself, mate. All right, that's it for part 4. In the next part, we're going to talk about how AJC Modular supports customers after the approval process, ensuring a seamless transition from paperwork to construction. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back, everyone, and welcome back to Building Modular Dreams. This is part 5 of episode 3, where we've been tackling the ins and outs of council approvals. Now, Mark, we've talked about the common pitfalls and how to avoid them, but today we're shifting gears to discuss what happens after you get that all-important approval. What's next for our customers?
That's right, Andrew. Getting council approval is a huge milestone, but it's really just the beginning of the next phase, taking your project from paper to reality. And at AJC Modular, this is where we really step up to make sure everything transitions smoothly, because let's face it, paperwork is only half the battle. The real magic happens when construction begins.
Exactly. So today, we're going to walk our listeners through how we support our customers after approval, ensuring that every step of the construction process is seamless and stress-free. And Mark, let's not forget, this is where the fun really begins.
Absolutely. It's one thing to visualize your modular home in a VR configurator, but seeing it come to life, that's an entirely different experience. So Andrew, where do we start once we have the green light from the council?
All right. The first thing we do is review the approved plans with the customer. This is a key step because it ensures everyone's on the same page before construction begins. We go through all the details, the layout, the materials, the finishes, to make sure there are no surprises down the track.
And let's not forget, this is also the perfect time for customers to make any last-minute tweaks. Maybe they've decided they want a larger deck or a different kitchen layout. As long as the changes don't affect the council approval, we can accommodate those adjustments before we break ground.
Exactly. And once the plans are finalised, the next step is to prepare the site. This involves everything from clearing the land to setting up the foundations. And Mark, this is another area where AJC Modular goes above and beyond, isn't it?
It sure is.
And because our buildings are constructed off-site in our state-of-the-art factory, the site preparation phase is often much quicker compared to traditional builds. While the site is being prepped, we're already busy constructing your modular home. It's like killing 2 birds with 1 stone, although in this case, the birds are council approvals and timelines.
Exactly. And that's one of the biggest advantages of modular construction, efficiency. But let's not forget the level of quality we're able to achieve in our factory environment. Because we're working indoors, we're not at the mercy of weather delays or site-specific challenges. It's controlled, precise, and consistent.
Absolutely. And while the home is being built, we keep our customers updated every step of the way. They'll get regular progress reports, photos, and even videos. so they can see their dream home coming to life.
And this is also when we start planning the logistics of delivery and installation. Transporting a modular building is no small feat, especially if the site is in a remote or challenging location. But Andrew, we've got some pretty impressive experience in this area, don't we?
We sure do. I remember one project where we had to deliver a modular home to a property in the snowy mountains. The road was narrow, winding and covered in ice, but our team made it happen without a hitch. It's all about careful planning and having the right equipment and expertise.
And once the building arrives on site, the installation process is quick and seamless. Because the home is already constructed, it's just a matter of placing it on the prepared foundations and connecting the utilities. Most installations are completed in a matter of days by the customer's on-site builder.
And let's be honest, seeing the building placed on site for the first time is one of the most exciting moments of the whole process. It's when the dream becomes a reality. And even after the keys are handed over, our support doesn't stop there. We provide ongoing after-sales support to address any questions or concerns the customer might have. Whether it's a maintenance question or help with setting up utilities, we're always just a phone call away.
That's right. At AJC Modular, we're not just building homes, we're building relationships, and that commitment to our customers is what sets us apart.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Mark. All right, before we wrap up part 5, let's give our listeners a quick summary of what happens after council approval. 1. Plan review. Finalise the approved plans and make any last-minute adjustments. Second site. Preparation. Clear and prepare the land for the building's arrival. 3. Construction. Build the modular home in our factory while the site is being prepped. 4th. Delivery and installation. Transport and install the building on site. 5. Quality inspection. Conduct a thorough check to ensure everything meets our standards. 6. After sales support. Provide ongoing assistance to ensure a smooth transition.
Perfect summary, Andrew. And for our listeners, if you're ready to start your modular home journey, head over to ajcmodular.com.au to learn more. Whether it's council approvals, construction, or anything in between, we've got you covered.
All right, that's it for part 5. In the next part, we'll wrap up this episode with some final thoughts and tips for navigating the modular building process. See you in part 6. Good day again, everyone. Welcome back to the final part of episode 3 of Building Modular Dreams. This is where we wrap everything up and leave you with some final thoughts and practical tips for navigating council approvals and the modular building process. Mark, how are you feeling as we bring this episode to a close?
I'm feeling great, Andrew. It's been a big episode, but an important one. Council approvals can seem like a daunting task, but as we've shown today, with the right approach and a great team, it's entirely manageable. And I think we've got some solid takeaways for our listeners to end on.
Absolutely. Let's start by recapping the journey we've covered in this episode. We began by breaking down the basics of council approvals, what they are, why they're necessary, and what can make them so tricky. Then, we moved on to common pitfalls and how to avoid them, sharing some real-world stories along the way.
And from there, we walked through what happens after you get that all-important approval. We talked about reviewing plans, preparing the site, and the efficiency of modular construction. Plus, we touched on the excitement of delivery and installation, as well as the ongoing support we provide after the build is complete.
It's been a lot of ground to cover, but all of it ties back to one key point. Council approvals don't have to be a nightmare. With the right team on your side, AJC Modular, you can navigate the process with confidence and ease.
Exactly. And speaking of confidence, Andrew, let's share some final tips for our listeners who might be just starting their modular building journey. What's tip number 1?
Tip number 1 is simple but crucial. Start early. Council approvals can take time, especially for more complex projects. The earlier you begin the process, the less stress you'll feel as your timeline moves forward. And if you're working with a team like ours, we'll make sure everything stays on track.
That's a great point. Starting early gives you breathing room for any unforeseen challenges. Now, tip number 2, be thorough. This applies to everything from gathering your initial documents to reviewing your plans. The more detailed and accurate you are, the smoother the approval process will be.
Absolutely. And that brings us to tip number 3. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Whether it's clarifying something with your council or getting advice from your builder, asking questions can save you a lot of headaches down the line. Remember, there are no silly questions when it comes to building your dream home.
Spot on, Andrew. And here's tip number 4. Leverage technology. Tools like our VR configurator not only help you visualize your project, but also ensure that it meets all compliance requirements before you even submit your application.
That's such a good one. Technology really does make a world of difference. And finally, tip number 5, work with professionals. This is the big one, folks. Navigating council approvals on your own can be overwhelming, but with a team like AJC Modular, you'll have experts guiding you every step of the way.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And you know what, Andrew? I think those tips really sum up everything we've talked about in this episode. It's all about preparation, attention to detail, and having the right support in place.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap things up completely, let's share one last story, something inspirational for our listeners. Mark, do you remember the project we did for the Wilson family in Canberra?
Oh, how could I forget? That was such a rewarding project. For our listeners, the Wilsons wanted to build a modular home on their rural property, not too far away from our factory, actually. But the site had some unique challenges. It was in a bushfire-prone area, the terrain was uneven, and they needed the home ready before their twins were born. Talk about a deadline.
Right, but despite the challenges, we made it happen. Using our VR configurator, we helped the Wilsons visualize a design that met all the bushfire regulations and maximized their use of the land. Our team handled the council approvals, site prep and construction, and we delivered their home on time, just weeks before the twins arrived.
And the best part? The Wilsons were over the moon with the result. They sent us photos of their family settling into the new home, and it was such a proud moment for our entire team. It's stories like that that remind us why we do what we do.
Couldn't agree more. All right, Mark, I think it's time to wrap up this episode. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Just this. Building your dream modular home is a journey, and like any journey, it's better with the right guide. At AJC Modular, we're here to take the stress out of the process so you can focus on what matters most, bringing your vision to life.
Well said. And for our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on social media and check out our YouTube channel for more behind-the-scenes content. And of course, if you're ready to start your modular building journey, head over to ajcmodular.com.au to learn more.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time on Building Modular Dreams. Take care.